I was at Giants camp, Albert, and I see a path to this team winning at least 9 games and finishing in second place in the NFC East.
I actually agree with you.
Yes! We are all in!
So this is a principle of mine, right? I would say there are a few principles I have in all my years covering the league. One of the principles I have, and this was actually really cemented, I would say, in 2017 with the Eagles, right? Is if you are good on the lines of scrimmage, then you will be in every game. And I remember the Eagles were coming off that year in 16 where Carson Wentz had played really well. And then you started to look at the rest of the roster and okay, like they got Alshon Jeffrey here and but then you looked at the lines of scrimmage and it was like, holy crap, they're loaded, And that's when like Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson and Jason Peters and Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, all those guys were in their prime, right? Like, so all those guys were at the height of their powers. And I remember saying like people always ask you, and you get asked this a lot, I'm sure too, like, who's your surprise team? Who's going to be like the one that's really going to break through? And that year it was the Eagles for me. It really cemented that like principle that I had that if you're really good on the lines of scrimmage, then you are going to be in every game. And I look at the Giants and they already had like some really nice building blocks in Andrew Thomas. Like Evan Neal's got talent. It hasn't manifested yet, but he's got talent. And they got Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau. Again, Thibodeau, you're kind of betting on the come. And then they go and they add Brian Burns, who I think was a steal. How they got him, what they got him for, versus what the Rams were willing to pay a year and a half earlier. I thought they stole Brian Burns. You add, a couple of nice pieces to the offensive line and Runyon and Illuminor, and it's a team that's going to be in every game. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's going to be a team that's going to be in every game. I think with that foundation, Brian Daboll makes it work on offense. And I think the defense has a chance to be really good with Shane Bowen as their first year defensive coordinator. So, all the way around, I think being in that division helps, but I don't know why they can't do what they did 2 years ago.
Right.
And that doesn't mean they're going to win the same amount of games, but I don't know why they can't be the team they were 2 years ago. Yes, like not having Saquon hurts, but I think they can make up for it. I think to some degree, like the dynamic element you had in Barkley can be replaced by Neighbors. I really like where the Giants are, especially again with where that division is.
You add Carmen Bricillo, who did a great job as the offensive line coach with the Raiders. I think that there's a lot of excitement about what he's bringing. Here's the moment that got me, the sub moment and then the moment. I was talking to Brian Daboll before practice, and he said, watch practice, right? Guess what we're not doing this year? 7-on-7. We're not doing 7-on-7. We're done with 7-on-7. And for the uninitiated, 7-on-7 is, quarterback, skill position players, tight ends. No linemen, right? And then defensive backs, linebackers, right? And so a lot of times, and I kind of ran this by a bunch of other coaches that weren't Giants guys, right? And I was like, well, what's the purpose of this? And they said, this is really unique. It's interesting what he's doing because 7-on-7 can breed bad habits, right? Can get a quarterback just comfortable. And maybe you do it because you're trying to get your defensive line and your offensive line work somewhere else, and you're trying to kill two birds with one stone, and it's a great way to do that. But what happens is it can breed, whether it's like a false sense of comfort or, just a non-realistic scenario where, I don't know, you're not feeling the pressure. You're not feeling the pocket, right? So every period is 11-on-11. It's live team all the time. And so Daniel Jones, I was standing about probably like 15 yards away from him, 20 yards away from him. And he drops back and he immediately sees that he's got Neighbors one-on-one with Cordell Flott. And he lets this ball go. And I felt like a little kid when I saw it. Like, I'm standing over it, probably at like the height of like the highest it's going to be, and it's coming down. And the velocity on this thing is making the ball like shake. Like, it's such a tight spiral, and it's going so fast and perfect, like right in, like leading Malik Neighbors into the end zone. And I was like, holy smokes. Like, Daniel Jones looks good. He looks tough. I know he's had some bad days, right? And he did throw a pick not too long after that. But this practice, it was 90 degrees outside. After the practice, he's doing like sprints on the side of the field. Like, this is a man possessed. I don't know. Let's go.
All right. Can I go off on two side tangents based on what you said?
Yes.
There. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Number one, the 11 on 11 thing I think is really interesting because I've been to 13 camps now. Today will be 14. There is so much more contact. There are so many more 2.5 hour practices. And I think the trend is swinging back around on sports science. And I was talking to one coach who said their injury rate 2 years ago was really high and they'd had a light camp. They went harder last year. They lost more guys in camp and then their injury rate went way down during the season. So I think that, and look, like I think a big part of this is like the whole like copycat thing. Because if you look at the 4 teams that were standing at the end, all 4 of those coaches subscribe to this, that you have to callous your team, that you should have 2.5 hour practices in training camp. That's San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan, Detroit with Dan Campbell, Kansas City with Andy Reid, and Baltimore with John Harbaugh. But it was noticeable, Connor. Like you go to different teams, it's like, holy crap. Like there are like where I feel like maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, you'd go out and there'd be a bunch of 90-minute practices.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot less of that now, and I thought that was interesting.